This is Andrew Petty is Dying, where we tap into the power of our mortality to become the people we were made to be and live the lives we were made to live. I'm your host, Andrew Petty, and I'm dying. I hate to say it, but so are you. Everybody, welcome to Andrew Petty is Dying. This is an exciting event for me because this is the first episode I will have released in video in its entirety. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. I just turned 50, but I'm not dead yet. Learning this video production thing and hoping and trusting that today's quality from a production standpoint is adequate for you, and I trust that it will be. This is a great conversation with a new friend of mine here in Steamboat. To make sure I cover some of the important and relevant details by way of setup for this conversation, I do have some scripted notes, and I'm going to refer to those as we continue along in this intro, and then we'll get to the conversation. So first, a question. Do you ever feel powerless against your hurts, hangups, and habits? Chris Ray's hurts, hangups, and habits literally killed him. Remarkably, his encounter with mortality wasn't permanent, and Chris returned transformed. Chris is no longer powerless against his hurts, hangups, and habits because he has learned to look up and let go, which is a big theme in today's conversation. If we have ears to hear, you and I can learn the same lessons from Chris's story without a harrowing ordeal of our own. If we have the courage to add action to insight, we can experience transformation too. I met Chris through a mutual friend here in Steamboat. His warmth, openness, and lack of pretense were simultaneously a bit disarming and a refreshing change. Chris exudes his unique brand of warmth, openness, and lack of pretense. But I realize that it's a combination of qualities that I often encounter in those in the recovery community. It occurs to me, too, that I belong to that community now due to the alcohol-free adventure that I've embarked on in 2024. I certainly don't claim to embody those qualities yet like Chris does, but I hope to someday, and Chris is a wonderful role model in that respect. Tune in to episode 94, Beyond Resolutions, a heroic path to your best year yet, to learn more about my recovery journey, en route to considering how you can go beyond resolutions to your best year yet too. I would really be remiss if I didn't thank Chris publicly for his part in encouraging me to accept this new call to adventure. Our story and our purpose in the world are inseparable, and Chris is no exception to this rule. His recovery journey led him to start Sober Steamboat, a community Chris shares more about in the course of our conversation. We cover other relevant biographical details and more about Steamboat at the beginning of our conversation. So let's get to it. Without further ado, it's a pleasure to introduce you to my new friend, Chris Ray.
I would say that I'm a person in long-term recovery. I've been in Steamboat for 10 plus years. I just are out of Steamboat or around Steamboat now for 10 plus years. I grew up all over the United States, kind of bouncing around, both as an adult and a kid, and lived the ski bum life in other towns as well. And even towns that didn't have skiing, I still live that lifestyle. I've been in and out of the service industry in many different occupations, and really feel like these last, I really started my recovery journey in 2018 when I decided to go to the Foundry there in Steamboat and decided to make a big life change. I've done all kinds of life changes throughout my life, but I would say the recovery one has been the most rewarding and the most challenging. And that has led me to all these little nooks and crannies of myself and the world that I had a doubt that they were attainable for me. I knew they were attainable for some people, but I thought that perhaps they were for other people. And I still think there's a lot of, caves and treasures and adventures that I'm going to get to do. And this is just one of them of many that I've had, especially in the last, 5 years. When I say I've been in recovery for 4.5 years, that's straight. I started in December of 2018. So it's been a wild ride. So as I mentioned, I went to rehab at the Foundry in 2018. I got out in February of 2019, and I went back to Indiana for 4 months to do outpatient, to kind of spend some time with the folks and my family and reconnect in that way. And as they were like, well, you can just stay in Indiana. You can, do these things. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to go back to Steamboat. I had actually purchased a condo and rented it out to a friend right before I went to rehab. And that was a very much a catalyst for me to get better. I was like, oh, I can't own a place here in Steamboat and do what I'm doing. Like, I'm a mess. So I rented out to him and then went to rehab. And then as I was preparing to come back, which was late May in 2019, I called my friend Cole, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get back. This is scary. This is like, if I go back to the way that I was, I'll die. I mean, I was very sick. I weighed 145 pounds. I had like 7 teeth pulled right before I went into rehab. I had all kinds of physical ailments and mental and spiritual ailments, but the manifestation of that was in my physical ailments. And I called my friend Cole, and I was like, what do you think about starting a Facebook group? Is all it was. Talk to other people that maybe want to do this, do things sober, go skiing, go camping, go to happy hour, get something to eat, go to coffee. Like, just how do we connect with other people? And I came up with the idea of Steamboat, as in sober Steamboat. And I didn't want to make it like, drug-free Steamboat or, all these like really strict monikers, because I really desired it to not just be a sober group. I wanted it to be a healthy group, a wellness forward group of people that, hey, if you want to drink after you do this, just don't come to our stuff drunk, or just come sober. And if you drink during the week, or if you want to do something else, feel free. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're just bored and we want to hang out, basically. And then from there, Cole's like, yeah. And I just started a little Facebook group, and I really was, I think I was really aggressive initially in like, hey, let's do this. And, especially leading up to during that summer, I was somewhat aggressive, but I had a couple other people that were like, okay, we'll do some happy hours with you. I'd invite people to go bowling. And a lot of the times I would foot the bill. I was just on my own dime. And then I relapsed in October of 2019. I was in Louisville, Colorado, and I was at a party where they were doing drugs, and I drank accidentally about 3 fingers of GHB. If you're looking at like a mug, it was like 3 fingers, which is enough to kill an elephant, and my heart stopped. And because I'd still been going out during that summer, I'd been doing some Steamboat stuff, but I'd still been going out, not drinking, but hanging out in places where people were partying or drinking, and drugs and things were around. So I learned my lesson. I was in ICU for a week. My heart stopped. I was on full life support. They called my parents and told them that I was dead, and that my dad, actually, I grew up in the casket business. So my dad, being a forward thinker, just had one lined up, and thank God we didn't have to use it. But it was wild. My friend Cole came down, my brother, and my parents, and there's a lot of trauma surrounding that I think I'm still trying to grasp. Like, my body still doesn't trust me sometimes. It's like, hey, you're like, what are you doing? We aren't supposed to be here. And so then after that, I really dove into Steamboat, and then the pandemic came, and I really had an opportunity to, we were, in all honesty, we were getting some of the pandemic money. So I had money coming in, and an idea, and time. And by that time, we had maybe recruited 150 people to be in Steamboat. And there was a core group of us, like Dakota and Cole and, Jeremiah, and a lot of people in my 12-step community, and outside of Sarah Coleman. I had started volunteering. As soon as I got out of the hospital, I saw that Sarah Coleman was doing clean and sober Steamboat with the health partnership. And I was like, I need to volunteer. So I went to the first meeting that she had, and I was like, yes, what do you need? I'll do it. I'll organize anything. She's like, sweet. And she had been my fitness instructor at the Foundry. So we already had a rapport. And so then the pandemic came around, and we threw a big event at Dakota was working at a farm. And we did a movie night with The Princess Bride, and I forget the other movie, some other movie. We did like a double feature, and this guy Ray was helping us, who's awesome. I think it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Ray. And it was just cool. And then I asked for money from nonprofits. And the health partnership was one of the big nonprofits. They gave us like $200 or something, and which is great. And then they were like, do you want a job? And I was like, I'm only, it had been October. Like I'd only had, a straight amount of whatever it was, 10 months of being, in strict recovery. And I was like, well, let's start off like 30 hours a week. And I have no idea what I'm doing. So just be aware of that. But I do want to help people. And I love that you're the resources, and I love the vision that you all have. The organization is fantastic. So we did it, dove in, and then by the end of that year, by the end of 2020, I think we had 1,000 people. And then it just exponentially grew, and we started doing campouts, and we started doing, the ski days. And, I went through a lot of training. I went through a lot of figuring out how I could help people and not get lost in that process myself, not lose my recovery, because I was very worried about that. I still do have a tendency to be a human doing rather than a human being. And it's a struggle. I put myself out there, and then I forget about my own needs, or also the needs of the people that are closest to me, relationships, friends. And I think I did a really good job, especially through the trainings that I went through. Sorry about the dog, if you can hear the dog. The trainings that I went through CCAR and Mind
Barking
Springs.
in Spanish.
The dogs understand Spanish. There's a packs of dogs that roam around here, and hopefully they quiet down. But at night, the first couple of nights, it was loud, but now I think I'm used to it. Chickens, dogs, all that stuff. But anyway, back to that. Yeah, I mean, it was great. And then we started, and then through the health partnership, we threw the first ever peer conference in Colorado for other peers in the recovery industry. And we got great funds from the Stedman Group, J.K. Costello and his people. And really it was so great it is so great to have that autonomy with the health partnership. And I met, through my work with the health partnership, I met the people in the organization of CHOW, which are Aaron and John Hinman. And I still work for them. I'm working remotely with them, doing work with restaurants and one-on-one with people, specifically in the service industry, which I really love. I grew up in the service industry. I was slinging corn dogs, I think, in 4th grade at the pool. And then I was washing dishes when I was in high school. And then I ran a pizza shop. I was a chef. I was a bartender. I was an owner. The list goes on and on. So, one of those things, Andrew, that we have is we are attracted to this, or I'm attracted to, speak for myself, the drama. And the service industry really created a space for me to have fun, to F around and find out. And there are a lot of ups and downs with that industry. And I have so much love for the people in that industry. So the work that I do with CHOW, the work that I do with the Recovery Friendly Workplace back in Steamboat, and specifically like the Dusty Grouse, and it really does. It really warms my heart, because I'm like, you don't have to live like this. You can be in this industry and still be healthy. And that doesn't mean you have to quit drinking. I never try to say that my solution is your solution. And I think that's really important to be like, what feels good to you.
I want to rewind a bit to what you called your relapse, and effectively a death or a near-death experience. And that encounter with your mortality appears to have been the galvanizing moment in your story that solidified your resolve to persist in a recovery journey. What are you aware of in terms of how that experience impacted you, especially as it relates to how you approach life and risks and values and priorities?
That's a good question. And it did. You're very perceptive on that, in that it was a moment where I saw something while I was out that I did not like. And I knew I had work to do. And I knew I had made some really wonderful decisions, and I had made some really hard, consequential decisions in my life. And then waking up out of that, literally coming out of that coma and seeing my parents, my brother, Cole. I'm still processing that. And it made me realize that, this selfish way of living, whether in recovery or not, is not going to get me anywhere. And that there's something bigger than us. Whatever that is, right? Whatever that is, whatever that speaks to you. And so I was, actually at a Venta and Vista hospital, which is a faith-based hospital. And I went to the chaplain and prayed. And
I was just going to ask, what was it about your experience that persuaded you that there's something bigger than us?
Well, I had this experience of being in a hole and scraping my teeth up the sand wall over and over again. And then when I came out of the coma, it was like my teeth had hooked onto this ledge. And then I saw the light, whether it was a hospital light or whether it was the light of, the higher power. Then I came out of it. And there's just like the circumstances of me being alive, of the maid finding me, of me keeping the door open, of, the fact that I was an organ donor, the fact that just the circumstances that I was actually able to be there. It wasn't of my doing. And I've always had this understanding of there's something greater than me, but I fought with that. And I said, well, I'm greater than what's greater than me. I have to control. I controlled a lot of my life. And through that, I gave up a little bit right there at the beginning. Right there at the beginning when I'm coming out of that overdose. I gave up a little bit. And then it led me to just ask questions. There was like, oh, yes, there's something greater than me. I didn't have any answer. I wasn't ready to even give up then, to accept that. But I knew that it was there. And so then I started attending things like after that, I went to every church in town. I went to the Catholic Church. I went to the Episcopalian Church. Went to the Methodist Church. I was riding bikes with the old priest. I went mountain biking with the Ernest, who used to be at the Catholic Church, which was great. And then I started attending the Buddhist Center, which is fantastic. And I really fought the Buddhist Center. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, I don't have to do anything to be accepted as this wonderful being who experiences suffering. I have to perform. I have to do things that, like, this old Catholic mindset of I have to earn my place with a higher power. I still had that. And sometimes I still do. It's a lot less than it was before. I have given my energy away and say, this is greater than me. And I can allow the universe, I can allow my higher power to come to me rather than always trudgingly through the mud, trying to find meaning. Because there's just, for me, through that overdose, kind of to loop back around that and moving forward, I found like just by being alive, I was alive. By existing, I was doing what my higher power wanted me to do, and how blessed and grateful I am for that.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone who's had an intense encounter with mortality themselves that hasn't emerged with some awareness of a larger reality, and often an entity within that larger reality, and has found a new kind of surrender or letting go to that larger reality and the entity that they experienced as a result of their encounter with mortality. And it speaks to the validity of that reality, that everyone, it seems, who has encounters with mortality comes away with something like that. So I just wanted to double down on that and highlight that from your story, and the fact that you're still wrestling with your experience. It's not been, to use an overused word, fully integrated or understood. There's still, my words not yours, but an element of mystery and murkiness attached to that experience and what it means for you exactly, and how one ought to live on the heels of it.
Uh-huh.
My thoughts.
I love. I mean, and I'm stubborn, and I love your thoughts on that. Some people go into those near-death experiences. They're like, I know exactly what I need to do, and this is it. I need to give, myself to this certain way of life. And I know that recovery is that way. I know that that's it. I know that having a higher power is that way. But it sparked the curiosity to seek out what I could utilize that existed around me, and really find out what it means to be human. I always looked, before I met you, I looked at your podcast, and I that idea that we are all dying. I grew up from a very young age in the casket business. So I knew all of these people that were surrounded by death constantly. And they were some of the most joyful people you'd ever meet in your entire life. They were happy to be alive because they saw death on a daily basis. I had friends that owned funeral homes. My dad, was a casket salesman and the vice president of a casket business. And I would deliver caskets, and I would help bring out bodies and things like that when I was through even my 20s. And so I was very close to death, but not as close as I came when I OD'd. And I think when you come out of that, when you see the dark, which death isn't always dark, death is sometimes a blessing, but when you see the dark, it is, you appreciate the light so much more. And that was the big thing that I took out of it. Like, I'm given all of these things. I'm given the chance to wake up every morning. I'm given the chance to look at the sunshine. I'm given a chance to be where I am, to be who I am, to have these opportunities. Not in a don't waste that sense of like there's a shortage of it. Like more of in the sense of like there's just abundance of these things that I've been given, and only in the last now probably year and a half has it come to me to get down on my knees every morning, pray to my higher power, and thank them for being around and the difference that it makes. I tried meditation at first. I'll meditate and I still meditate, but I'll meditate for 10 minutes every morning, and that works a little bit. But then I was like, why don't I just pray? Why don't I just take action and not pray for, I want this, I want a better motorcycle, or I want to, I want hair to grow on my head or like these things, but to just say, can you just help me practice today? Can you help me practice understanding of who I want to be, of the man, the person, the brother, the friend, the lover that I want to be. And I think that has made a significant change. And it took me 2.5 years until after I overdosed to say, all right, Chris, you got to get down on your knees and pray every morning. And it's just such a relief to know that I don't have to be the one in charge. I can give it up.
It's significant that the thing we resist often most, which is relinquishing some sense of control or ability to determine outcomes, is the thing that produces peace and courage and confidence and ease. But we resist it so desperately when we are fortunate enough to receive whatever merciful events in our lives bring us to the point of being willing to let down some of our resistance, and we begin to submit to something and someone greater than us. Then we find what we've been looking for all along. So that is not lost on me as you share that story. And of course, I believe and think and act similar to you in that regard, and increasingly so over the past couple of years, as I've gone through my own journey and grappled with mortality and had these conversations and persisted on frontiers of my own. That is one of the, if it's it might be the primary benefit, but it's at least a collateral benefit of being a pioneer in our own lives and accepting calls to adventure that come to us, be they voluntary or otherwise, is that we have to go beyond the bleeding edge of our innate capacities in order to operate on those frontiers. And in doing so, we find where we're inadequate and insufficient and are given the opportunity to appeal to resources beyond ourselves. And in that process, I've discovered I'm refined, I'm fortified, I'm encouraged, I'm strengthened, but it's through dependence upon God that those things occur. And what I'm discovering is that the more I voluntarily enter these frontiers, and when involuntary ones come along, enter those adventures with courage, the more I recover my humanity. Meaning I feel more human, more real, more grounded in reality, more in touch with the full scope and span of this existence in that dependent state than I do ever when I'm attempting to white knuckle and manhandle my way over some finish lines that I think are desirable, or trying to figure things out myself. And the skeptic will say that what you do in those moments of need is you fabricate the thing that will meet the need and then lean on it like a crutch. And I feel very differently about that. I think what this represents is a return to our intended design and the author of that design. And the fact that we have needs that we can't meet ourselves does in fact point to the existence of someone beyond us who is meant to be there for us to lean on. So personal soapbox, but that's what much of what you're saying brings to mind for me. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately, and really encouraging myself to get out even further on the proverbial limb. In my life and in my life with my wife, we've discovered the further we move out on the proverbial limb, in real life, the further you move out, the flimsier it gets. But in this tree of life that we're talking about, the further we venture in faith out on the limb, the stronger the limb gets,
Uh-huh.
and the more exhilarating the adventure becomes.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Because you're trusting. You're trusting what is, that has always carried us through, and trusting that you have that, that practicing non-duality as well. There's not, for me anyway, it's like it exists within me. It exists within you, Andrew. It exists within this dog that's barking. It exists within the leaves that are around us, and exists in every human being. And the more you have faith in something greater than yourself, the easier life gets. And I can always consider it walking down a hallway, right? Like if I'm looking at a hallway and say there's all these doors all the way down the hallway, and there's opportunities behind every door, and if I'm running down the hallway and I'm just trying to knock on every door, hey, what's going on, this, that, the other, which I've done in recovery, in life, I'm going to miss the one that opens for me when I'm ready. And if I'm strolling past it and I'm wondering, and then it just so happens that I look over and the door opens, and it's this thing, this person, this opportunity, this adventure that is coming to me rather than me forcing myself upon it. And that's where I'm really trying to act and know that the universe is going to open that hallway door for me. And that's the one that I should follow it. And you feel it when it happens. You feel it inside of you that says, oh, this is the right place to be. And you feel it when it says, when the universe tells me, maybe you should think about this. Maybe this isn't, what you have to do. There was I was kind of trying to force an opportunity during this trip in Costa Rica of an ayahuasca retreat. I've looked into it, I've done this, and it presented itself to me. And I said, okay, well, let me look into that. So I called them, I got medically cleared, I did all the essay other, and then came the money part. And I asked work and I asked this, and then I started having reservations about it. And I was like, maybe this isn't the time. It feels like I'm forcing it, which me even a year or so ago would have been like, well, but I can do it. I'm just going to white knuckle it, as you say, and make it happen. And I feel like by stepping back, I've not only allowed that to come to me at another time, if it ever does, but it's also allowed me to slow down here and while I've been here. And it allowed me to be more present when I was helping my family, when I was with my family in Florida over the past, the 2 months before I got here. Instead of shuffling around saying, I need to do this, I need to make money. Even when I got to Florida, I was like, oh, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to do this. And it presented, I got a job, and then I was like, this doesn't feel great. So I did the work I did with Chow. Through that, I was able to spend more time with family. I was able to do these things on the weekends with my family that I haven't been able to do in a long time, and just sit with them. And I'll never get that time back. And it was hard, and it was good, and it was allowed because I didn't try to force these situations. I need more money. I need more this. I need that. I need to experience this. And my mind tells me I always need more. That's why I'm in recovery. I need more. I need more friendship. I need more relationship. I need more money. I need more drugs. I need more attention. I need more this. So I'm trying to figure out, with that relation to the higher power, with that relation to the universe, it's going to give me what I need. And I see that, especially here, because I'm not in a consumer-based society. People have, Costa Rica is really nice. It's great. I'm in a very small Tico town that is mostly Spanish, mainly Spanish speakers, and even the tourists, most of them, there's hardly any Americans here. but everybody has what they need. And, even like I was telling you about the Israelis that are over here, they have what they need. They're not wealthy people. When we think of people going on vacation for a couple of months, we think, oh, well, they must have a trust fund or they must have this. Like, no, these people are just piecing their life together and out there on this limb, having faith that they can, whether it's in themselves or whether it's something greater than them, or just the adventure itself, maybe having a faith in that whatever decision I make will lead me to the next open door. And I find it really different to have that, because I think we're told we have to create these things. And there's a balance. You kind of nudge yourself to the right. Say you're driving a boat and there's 1 degree to the right, 1 degree to the left. If I go either one of those degrees, it's going to get me in a whole different course, 600 miles down that line. So having faith and feeling in your intuition is something that I'm leaning into. I'll never get it. I'll never find balance. We had a chow meeting yesterday about balance, and one of the guys was saying he's seeking balance. I'm not going to find it. I'm going to seek it. And then I'll probably see it for a second, and then it'll be gone.
What comes to mind for me as you say that is we often conceive of our work as humans doing the right things in order to create results that we find appealing. And perhaps in the Western world, we're even more susceptible to that, where certain kinds of achievement are praised above others, and we begin to buy into the idea that that's how I create a reasonable and functional and worthwhile identity. But what I hear you saying is something quite different, and it's something like this: that the real work for we humans is summoning the courage on a daily basis to trust that there is purpose and design in our existence, and that we can connect with the author of our existence as a trustworthy, reliable source for all that we need. And that's very different work than, especially we in the Western world, typically consider the work of living. And it's also the kind of thing that many would be inclined perhaps to dismiss or call woo-woo, or but I do think the results speak for themselves. You know a tree by its fruit. And Chris, when I first met you, maybe partially being the introvert that I am and you being the extrovert that you are, I was kind of in my own world and walked up, and you just immediately outstretched your arms and gave me this big warm embrace, and I was sort of, oh, all right, thanks. That was, and I immediately began to experience you as someone who had a genuine warmth and a vitality to you. And as I began to know more of your story, it became clear why, apart from whatever innate places those things spring from, you had those things. And it's because your experiences, if I can infer, have shown you in ways that were tremendously painful when they were occurring, but ultimately redemptive, that what matters more than other things is what we might call the mundane things. The conversation you're having right now with whomever you're with, the opportunity to be in the presence of another human and experience the magical stuff that happens when two people get together and in the spirit of goodwill and a desire to learn and grow together. So you are a living, breathing testimony to the merciful and redemptive effects of suffering in our lives, and how it has peeled back or maybe scraped off the barnacles that we accumulate in life that obscure the pearl within. And so like you, I haven't had the same forms of suffering, but I've had my own, and there will be more. Now, it feels like a dangerous thing to say because what suffering is coming next, but I really relate to suffering as one of the most merciful things we can experience in this life, because it parts the clouds that obscure the truth and what matters most, and allows us to see it and connect with it and live according to it. Let's move forward in time a little bit from your history to your present story. And I want to ask what led you to this, what led to the call to adventure in Costa Rica? How did it first make itself known?
It's been there for a long time. And thank you for all that. I mean, I really just the pearl and around the barnacle is a very Buddhist thing to say. So before I move on to that, I love that we're genuinely just wonderful creatures at the core of each other, at the core of oneself.
Well, and I totally bungled the metaphor because barnacles don't have pearls, but we get the point.
Oyster, barnacle, SpongeBob, whatever it is. I'm the Patrick in the middle of the thing. But the
right. Yeah, some marine creature.
So I actually came down to this particular part of Costa Rica 20 something years ago. Almost 20 years ago with my dad, when I had another friend living down here in Santa Teresa, which is just across the hill. And we came down, we went surfing, I partied really hard, I was like 25, my dad was 50 something, he didn't party as hard as I did, but, we had drinks and things like that. And I always said when I left, I was like, I just love that. I love that place. And I want to get back there someday. I want to actually, I remember saying that, like, I wanted to start a retreat. I remember being in a restaurant interview in Cincinnati for this really fine dining restaurant. And it was like a couple years after my vacation here. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to start a retreat center in Costa Rica. I never did, but that thing lived inside of me this whole time. And I had a plan for spring of 23 to go to Portugal for a extended period of time. They decriminalized drugs there about 20 years ago. And I really was like, I'm going to go there and study how they operate around this and how society operates around it. And I ran into some big financial issues. And I got out of those. That's a whole nother, hero's journey in itself. And, but it was a really tough winter, the last winter we had for me financially. And I felt really good about the responsibilities that I took, accepting some of the bad decisions that I had made, and taking care of those poor decisions in a way that was fiscally and I felt ethically responsible for myself. And then I said, well, I still want a vacation. I can't afford, I had like 30 grand saved up and that was all gone. And so I wanted a vacation. I'd started working at a restaurant, Besame, shout out to them, in the winter. And I saved up some money again. And I reached out I told my boss, I was like, I'm getting burnt out. I need a couple weeks of vacation and I don't know where to go. I don't want to go all the way to Europe because it's just too far of a flight. And she mentioned that a woman in Steamboat owned a house here near Santa Teresa in a town called Cabuya. So I was like, it sounds good because Santa Teresa is now really busy and really Instagrammy and all that stuff. I was there last night. It's wild. But Cabuya is very quiet. And it's a little 2-bedroom casita. One room has air conditioning. I came to find out it's really fancy for this part of town, but she told me when I first got it, it was, a Tico house, which means there's like bugs and animals and all those things, which there are, but it's lovely. So anyway, I came down here for 2 weeks and I loved it. And I ended up meeting some people and I taught yoga while I was here. And it's a very quiet little town. And it's very much seacoast, quiet Tico town. And so I kept that in my mind. And I said, all right, well, let's go through the summer. That was a wonderful experience. I don't know if I want to go back there. And then as the summer came around, truck here for just a second. There we go. And as I went through the summer, it just was calling to me more, right? That intuition that we mentioned. And as it called to me more, I listened. And I said, well, we had such a great winter last year. What does it matter if I miss another winter? Like, I'm not going to top that 500 plus. I got like 84 days in, just, all powder days and blah, blah, blah. And then as I think it was August came around, I was like, I'm going to do this. So I reached out to the woman who owns the house and I said, how do you have any space available? I wasn't even thinking of 3 months. I was like, do you have any space available anywhere between January and May? She said, well, I have 3 months in January, February, March, and through April. And so more than 3 months. And at that moment, we were sitting at Dusty Grouse and having coffee, and I was like, I'll take it. Didn't have any plan, didn't have any like how am I going to do this? I just said, I'll take it. If this is being laid upon my lap in such a manner, and I want to trust my own decision making through connection, I'm going to do it. So I said that, and then from there, like a week later, my buddy that was down when I was here in the spring, and a guy that was a colleague of mine in recovery, he calls me up and says, and I'm looking for somebody to rent my place. He goes, hey, do you know anybody renting a place in Steamboat for the winter? I'm looking. And I was like, just so happens that it's me. I'm here for it, right? So then that lined up, and then my mom and dad were like, hey, do you want to spend some time down in Florida? At that time, you could only stay in Costa Rica for 3 months. Now it's 6. And I was like, well, I'll spend some time in Florida with them. And it all just, we wanted to connect with each other. We wanted to see how, like I said earlier, just to have that space with them. It was good. And I got to connect with some little family down there. And it just came about that I quit my job at the health partnership. And it was this long, 2-month process of me quitting a job, which usually I'm just like, oh, see ya, But instead it was this beautiful process that was also really hard of shifting a lot of my responsibilities and letting community members know, and letting the hospital know that I was going to be gone, letting, the gyms or the faith-based communities say, hey, if you need anything, contact someone over here at the health partnership. And then also deciding through that process to step away from social media for the time that I was gone, the time that I am gone, this now being I'm 2.5 months in. Because social media is a part of that more for me. It's part of the, that attention, that validation. And I want to feel what it's like to not have that. So all of these came together, and I loaded up my car in November and went to an NA convention, a 12-step NA convention in Denver, and then drove and saw some friends and have all my stuff in Florida and flew here a couple weeks ago. It's actually 2 weeks ago today. And it was the thing that's calling me is the peace and quiet and the finding out, as I mentioned in my email, finding out who I am when I'm not doing. And that's what just keeps coming up for me. And it's through that Buddhist practice that I resist so much. I've been attending the Steamboat Buddhist Center back in the corner with my camera off online, which is, when I first started going to the Buddhist Center, it was me sitting right up front, asking all the questions, inserting myself into the conversation. And now it's like, I'm just going to listen, just like I am trying to do with this is just listen to who I am without all of this action. And there's a little bit of action, but people are like, well, what's your plan when you get down there? I don't have a plan. I'm going to teach yoga a couple of days a week and work a little bit online. I'll let it unfold as it comes down, and being 2 weeks in, that's exactly what's happening. I had Spanish class this morning. It just so happened to, the woman that kind of manages this house for the person in Steamboat that owns it. I was just saying, hey, can I practice my Spanish with you? And she goes, well, yeah, obviously. And I also have a Spanish teacher. And so I was like, sign me up. I'm going to take an in-person class. And so I've been doing that the last couple of weeks. These friends that I said I met, it just so happens that I'm sitting around and one shows up and they're just so welcoming and warm and want to do things. And I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Let's do an acro yoga workshop together. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll do it. Let's load up with a bunch of Chileans and Israelis and people from France and things like that, and mosh our cultures together and have this strange conversation between Hebrew, Spanish, French, and English. And just being so grateful for the presence of being. I said human doing a couple of times, so just human being, of letting the world come to me. And I'll find that balance of being back in the mix. I'm having conversations about Steamboat with people, telling them all about it. And then, we talk to each other about our lives and what we do. And I think another reason of leaving is perspective. Like, what do I have in Steamboat? A lot, a whole lot, and sometimes you take that for granted. And I have a lot of appreciation for that, a lot of appreciation for the community, a lot of appreciation for just the opportunities that we have there, and see how what we do as a collective group of people in Colorado is so special and so like, man, I'm trying to think. It's just, there's a lot of faith in it. We have faith in each other, and we have faith in the fact that we're going to help each other out. And I see a lot of admiration, and I hear from people I speak to, they're like, oh my God, that sounds like, I wish I had that. I wish I had, that type of community, type of support that you speak of. And yeah, I mean, and so for what led to this adventure is curiosity. Just say curiosity, right?
One thing that sticks out to me about your description of what you have in Steamboat that being in Costa Rica helps you have even more perspective on is that what you have in Steamboat is not necessarily the typical experience of someone living in Steamboat, but you've carved out a community of people whose bond is founded at least on being on a similar adventure together,
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with the adversity that comes with that adventure, and dealing with the camaraderie that results when you move forward onto an adventure that's full of adversity and trials and challenge. Then you begin to distinguish yourself from the masses who are on the wide road that leads to destruction, because you are a small group of people who are attempting to find the narrower road that leads to life. And there's so much life to be found in that kind of shared experience. And we're desperate for that, I think, in the Western affluent world. And so again, man, can we summon the courage to move forthrightly into whatever involuntary adventures confront us, and to, even better, voluntarily embark on whatever adventures are calling to us. And Chris, you're a great example of someone who's doing that and has been willing to summon the courage and the humility to pay attention to the adventure that was beckoning to you and just go ahead and do it, understanding that you don't know what the result will be, which is, of course, by definition, the very nature of an adventure. We don't know the outcome. Mm-hmm. And to deal with the questions and the critiques of not having a plan that probably inevitably have come from various sources. And, well, what's the purpose of this? And you might say, it's not really clear to me, but it's calling to me. And for people to kind of look at you askance or askew, and you're doing it anyway. And so it's a great example, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And of course, this is intended to be the before interview, and we will at some point, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, capture the after interview as you've returned, assuming you do return, who knows, and it's an adventure. So maybe this is just a stepping stone to other worlds unknown. But Post Costa Rica, we plan to have another conversation where you begin to share with us what the adventure was actually like compared to your expectations and hopes and dreams and fears about it, and what you're beginning to see you acquired by way of treasure on that adventure that is not only, of course, valuable to you, but then can be valuable to all of us who didn't go on the same adventure.
For sure.
And in Chris's life, for all who are listening, we already see the hero's journey at work, which is he went on a voluntary adventure into sobriety and recovery, had an involuntary foray into relapse that galvanized, and an encounter with death that galvanized his resolve to persist on his journey of recovery. And as he returned to the ordinary world that the hero's journey talks about, he brought with him the gift of Steamboat and a community that hadn't existed before in that way. And that's Chris's story. But what is your story? And in what ways have you brought treasure back to those in the ordinary world that was valuable to them? And even better, what adventures can you go on now? What adventure is available to you right now that's calling to you, that if you summoned the courage and the humility to accept it, would inevitably take you through some challenging times and to some of the nooks and crannies of yourself inwardly that are unexplored and many of them unpleasant, but you would emerge different and changed and better with something of value, not only for you, but for the rest of us. And this is a recipe for living a life we can be outrageously proud of and becoming someone we genuinely feel good about. Chris, in closing, what do you hope that we all take away from today's conversation? If you could bottle one or two things and give it to us, and we ingested it precisely as you intended, what might that be?
For sure. A couple of things. I think as I look, I did your hero's journey workshop back in October, and I think something that really calls to me, that has called to me through Steamboat, through recovery, through where I'm even at here just for a couple of weeks, are the people that come into our lives and how they can help us along our journey and how we are also a part of theirs. It's like, I heard your analogy to Lord of the Rings, which was interesting in one of your episodes previous. And it's almost like I feel like sometimes I'm going into like this little shop and they're giving me this nugget of knowledge or this little information that's going to help me along that journey. And I have to say yes to that little nugget of knowledge. And I have to be curious about what's being offered, and curious about how either this little experience or piece, or even if it's a physical item, can help me in my own path down the way. And that curiosity around what's coming next, I think is really where I'm at right now, and without expectation. And I do that by having interactions and having a community and having relationships with other people wherever I am. The other part is that there's all of these little adventures inside of this grand one, the grandest one being just our full experience of life, but just these daily little adventures. For me, just going to the store, going up to Kobono and going to the store and going to the bank is a whole adventure within this Costa Rica thing. Learning how to speak Spanish is a whole little adventure. So that, looking at the curiosity around the mundane, and will lead you, for me, I speak for myself, the curiosity around the mundane leads me to have this rich, full, loving, caring experience and connection with the rest of the world around me. And I took that for granted for a long time. So I'm trying not to now.
Thank you, Chris.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that perspective, and I take that to heart, and I hope all of us will who are listening today. I don't know how much you want to be in contact with us back home or others, but you can certainly share how our listeners can connect with you in ways that you're open to while you're down retreating in Costa Rica. So how can listeners connect with you while you're away?
For sure. I mean, I am, when I get back, I'll probably hop back on social media at Steamboat, and then I'll be back involved with the group in Facebook, Steamboat, which is a private group. And that is, I'm journaling every day. I'm doing all these things, really collecting my thoughts without outside interpretation. But while I'm down here, I mean, heck, if anybody's in the service industry and they want to meet me at Tuesdays at noon and online, or if they're at Dusky Grouse, they can always see my face. We're talking about life and care through a CHOW, which is Culinary Hospitality Outreach and Wellness. It's just about hanging out and finding a better life in the service industry. And then I'm also doing a men's meeting on Wednesday nights with the same organization at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. But I was really inspired by another friend of mine who does all this kind of wild traveling. She's from Steamboat, but she also drops social media, and she said, well, you want to follow my adventures? She goes, I'm dropping social media. Well, you want to follow my adventures? You can't. I'll tell you about them some other time. And it's one of those things where I'm really going to sit back in it, and, this isn't forever, like all things. But I want to see what Chris has to say and what the universe wants to tell me.
Beautiful. Thanks. And I will include links to what Chris has shared in the show notes. And Chris, thanks so much for your time, man, and for the opportunity to dip into your retreat down in Costa Rica briefly and get a glimpse of your view from there, as we dipped into your history to get a glimpse of what you see now differently as a result of the experiences that you've had. They help us all immensely. And I encourage all of us to summon the courage to not wait until our own involuntary adventures come to begin taking to heart some of what Chris has shared with us. But how can you begin using one insight even that Chris has offered to us today to deepen your adventure and to allow you to become who you've been made to be, and to encourage you to live with even more guts, gusto, and abandon. So remember, you are going to die, but you are not dead yet. So get after it. Insight plus action equals transformation. What's sticking with you from this episode? What's just one thing you're willing and able to do with that insight to begin creating transformation today? If you need an extra nudge to get going, ask yourself this question. If I knew I was going to die 5 years from today, what would I start doing differently today? Whatever it is, summon the courage right now to do that thing. Today is the only day we've got. It really is. Tomorrow never comes. Don't take tomorrow for granted. Only you can do the work, but you can't do the work alone. None of us can. I always offer one free coaching session. Visit andrewpettycoach.com to schedule yours today. I'm so glad you tuned in today. Thank you for your time, attention, and trust. Don't forget to follow this show. I'll see you next time on Andrew Petty is Dying. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.